Well, almost 2 years ago, I was alerted by a teacher to a charitable organisation called the Education Hub. Now, according to their website, they said the Education Hub was launched in 2017 with a mission to bridge the gap between research and practice in education in order to improve educational opportunities and outcomes for children and young people. Our work is focused on providing early childhood and school teachers and leaders with access to good evidence, research, and practice. Now, look, to be fair, the Education Hub does some good research and professional development around positive eating, visual arts, nature play, and music. Although I did notice a page entitled Social Justice in Early Childhood Education, which is classic critical theory 101, including statements like early childhood is a critical time for children to begin to understand and explore gender. As children navigate gender in their gendered lives, it's important to examine discourses around gender. There remains a persistent tendency in early years setting for gender to be binarized in everyday and subtle ways. Teachers can engage in anti-bias and gender expansive practices which acknowledge the gendered nature of early childhood and seek to address gendered issues in meaningful ways. This can include challenging assumptions which stem from a binary and conventional view of gender. Yes, don't you dare say boys and girls. And there's also comments about decolonization of education spaces, which focus on acknowledging colonization and its continued impacts while seeking to disrupt and reconceptualize colonial understandings. Did I tell you this is for preschool facilities and kindergartens? And look, if you want to read more about why critical theory in our education system is a problem and how it's actually present, then read our fact sheet, which is available at criticaltheory.nz. There's even this important stuff for your 3-year-old, climate change and sustainability, which are matters of critical concern where children deserve a voice and can make a difference. For example, by exploring weathering with pedagogies, which foreground connectedness between children, weather, and the world. Whew, no wonder our toddlers need an afternoon nap. I mean, I feel like a nap after reading this. But look, I've been distracted and back to the topic of this McBlog. As part of professional development for early childhood teachers, preschool, there's a section on talking about gender nonconformity in early childhood education. And in the training webinar, a Professor Mara Sapon-Shevin from Syracuse University in the US, a professor of inclusive education, focusing on diversity, equity, and inclusion and how we teach children, how we prepare teachers, and how we help adults become active allies in resisting oppressive language and behavior. Discussed how early childhood teachers can approach gender nonconformity, as well as dealing with gender stereotypes like girls can't be doctors. It's also teaching very young children, preschoolers, about gender diversity. And on her website, she says this, gender expression can be quite fluid, and just because a child chooses to express themselves in one way now does not mean that they have to remain with that gender identity for the rest of their lives. Well, no, that's not gender identity, that's personality. That's expressing your likes and dislikes. Girls can be more masculine-like, boys can be more feminine-like. Girls can be doctors, boys can be nurses. But that's nothing to do with choosing your sex, chemicalizing and castrating healthy bodies and ignoring biology. But she also wants early childhood education teachers to become activists. And she says this, children usually embrace ideas about transgender identities and the shift in pronouns readily when they are positively modelled. Most resistance comes from adults, with young children usually demonstrating very little resistance. Yes, those pesky parents. She then goes on to say, families of children may not always be comfortable with teachers' support for a range of gender identities. Teachers may find it helpful to have a specific policy on their approach. Uh, to teaching about diversity. So basically what she's saying is that if parents object to their little children being indoctrinated, the preschool teacher just says, oh, well, it's a specific policy of this place. There seems to be no acknowledgement of the engaging with the community to find out what they want, what parents actually want for their children. And then she goes on and she says this: there are many useful resources to support teachers to learn about the experiences and preferences of those who identify as transgender and non-binary, or who are gender non-conforming. Finding out about and using people's preferences for pronouns is important. They can be used to replace he, she, and can make using language much simpler. Understanding that every small step towards dismantling oppression and stereotypes is a step, and that no one can do it all, can help reduce feelings of overwhelm. Not to do anything, however, reinforces dominant stereotypes and injustices for people who are non-conforming. But then there's this book where the gender ideology indoctrination comes in full steam. Now remember, this is for preschoolers. What are your words? A book about pronouns by Catherine Locke. Well, let's have a quick look at some of the pages. It says, my Uncle Leor is coming to visit today. I can't wait to show them around my neighbourhood. And I can't wait for all my neighbours to meet them. I can guarantee that the little children are going to say, meet them? You said it was just uncle. Is auntie coming as well? Some smart kid will probably say, well, that doesn't make sense, miss. It goes on, they have many colourful hats. They are a biologist, referring to one person. I learn a lot from Uncle Leor, like that people can be described by more than what they look like or what they do. In fact, there are lots of words to say who people are and how they feel. Some of those words are pronouns. Pronouns are words that can take the place of your name, like I, me, you, she, he, or they. That seems to be based on qualities which seems to be stereotyping, doesn't it? Which is slightly ironic. And then it says, sometimes I just use one set of pronouns. Sometimes I use all the pronouns I can think of. Sometimes I change them. So it's pretty clear that there's a strong indoctrination of gender ideology going on here with this key book recommendation for, remember, preschoolers. And then there's songs that preschoolers will love, the trans and non-binary kids mix. Although you probably won't like the mix if you have little children at these institutions. And one thing that the site also talks about is neo-pronouns. Have you heard of them? Well, you have now. Let me tell you about neo-pronouns. Neo-pronouns are also pronouns and include those pronouns besides the ones most commonly used in a particular language. As one's pronouns are ultimately a reflection of their personal identity, the number and types of neo-pronouns a person may use is limitless. Examples of neo-pronoun sets include sie, zur, hers, sie, zur, zers, and fey, fair, fairs. Yeah, preschoolers really need to know all that, eh? So after all that, I wasn't surprised when somebody sent me the latest ECE magazine, the winter edition of the Space magazine, which apparently is sent to every ECE and kindy and preschool in New Zealand. And here's the latest edition. Lovely cover and the feature story, Beyond the Binary. So let's have a look inside the magazine for preschool teachers who are teaching preschoolers. And so here we go. First page, LGBT. It's not all sunshine and rainbows. And the first definition there, top left, rainbow families that are constructed with parents who are part of the LGBTQIA+ and Takatui community. This includes blended, single, and extended family compositions. Yes, I bet you never knew that blended families, even single parent families, are part of the LGBTQIA+ group. That's what the plus means, apparently. Anyone we can imply might belong to their group. Uh, Other definitions: LGBTQIA plus, queer, gay, bisexual, pansexual, sex, which is a biological term that refers to the physiological sex characteristics like genitalia and chromosome composition that differ between female, male, and intersex people. Uh, well, if it's based on chromosomes and genitalia, then you'd think they could define what a woman is, but they can't. Gender, they say, is a social, psychological, and cultural term referring to individual identities. They have got definitions for cisgender, transgender, intersex, and non-binary. Remember, this is for preschoolers. And then the article by a Canadian who came to New Zealand to to teach preschoolers. Is this what you call an imported culture war? I better tell Chloe about this. Anyway, this ECE teacher from Canada tells us that she's marrying her same-sex partner. And she says, as Emily and I are both teachers at Child Space, we were excited to tell the children about our news, which had me reflecting on just how grained our societal heteronormative narrative is when some children would ask, but when does the husband come? Our response of, well, he doesn't come, she is going to be my wife and I'll be her wife, and there won't be a husband, was met with bewilderment, as I'm sure you can imagine. Yes, I can imagine, actually. Our children seem to just take it as it was. So Emily will be your wife? Yes. Okay, can I come to the wedding? And when are we going to have afternoon tea? Because I'm hungry in my puku. Yeah, it's interesting how children just go back to the basics. They're really not interested in all the indoctrination, are they? The way families are made, so the article goes on, the way families are made up has changed remarkably over the last 30 years, meaning a wider range of families now attending ECE services. Thus, we need more inclusive teaching pedagogies. But there is an absence of content around rainbow families during teacher training. While diversity is a hot topic in ECE, like diverse cultural identities, support for children with diverse needs, rainbow inclusion often gets left out of the conversation altogether. This is partly because LGBTQIA content is still seen as taboo or inappropriate for children. Well, yes, correct. Let kids be kids, as they say. Most conversations about rainbow families in ECE settings are reactive rather than proactive. Teachers respond when a child says something homophobic. Yes, a child being homophobic. Or speak up when gender norms are reinforced. For example, you can't wear that dress because you're a boy. However, we really start the conversations ourselves proactively. This means that despite all the amazing diversity in the communities we serve, many ECE services are unintentionally upholding heteronormativity, or the idea that heterosexuality is the only normal or expected identity. The formation of both our identities and our definitions and expectations of gender and relationships begins in early childhood. We create what is normal as we grow. Kayako, or teachers, have the power to normalize all kinds of families, relationships, and identities through intentional teaching. I think what they're meaning to say is teachers have the power to indoctrinate. ECE teachers need to recognise the massive role we play in shaping children's understanding of diversity. It's not just about a Be Kind poster on the wall with a token rainbow flag. It's about the stories we choose to read, the conversations we're willing to have, and the family structures we choose to represent or ignore. We include books where children have two dads or two mums, not just the ones that are about having same-sex parents, but ones where they just happen to feature as a natural part of the narrative. And it continues, children are not yet prejudiced and are receptive to an inclusive perspective that promotes social cohesion. Well, not correct. They're receptive to what's for lunch, who they will play with, and will mum or dad or maybe even grandma pick them up soon. We're talking about preschoolers. By opening children's eyes to different family structures, ways of being, and ways to love, we are not telling them they need to go, be, and or do these things. We are simply saying they exist in the hopes that they can develop an inclusive worldview of acceptance, understanding, and respect. And then maybe one day, when my partner and I have a baby, children can take that as it is and not feel the need to ask where the dad is. Well, actually, that's the exact question we'll ask. And it's the question the child will one day also ask: where's my dad? And then the recommended books to indoctrinate the preschoolers. Kapai Mahu, a beautiful and captivating story of gender through an Indigenous perspective, a traditional Hawaiian and Tahitian gender identity. My Shadow is Purple, a favourite puka puka at Child Space Wilton. Good place to stay clear of. All about gender diverse identities. It details the nuances of gender identity, making space for non-binary people, while also taking into account the diverse nature of gender. Julian is a Mermaid, written with aroha, about a tamaiti who is exploring gender as a form of play. Being You is part of the First Conversation series for young tamariki, introducing the idea of gender to them. The language is very simple and factual, like some people are girls, some people are boys, some people are neither, some people are both. Remember, this is for 2 to 4 year olds and maybe younger. And then off to the cover page story. Beyond the Binary, Kayako Views of the Gender Spectrum in Early Childhood Education, from binary views to embracing fluidity. And it says, I am an early childhood kayako parent and researcher who's been thinking a lot about gender recently. Could be the problem. Years ago, as a kindergarten kayako, I remember thinking gender and specifically supporting gender equality was done. I felt that as a sector, we'd done a good job of ensuring girls and boys had opportunities to explore the whole curriculum. And we knew not to give meaningless gendered phrases like good girl or good boy. Oh, no, we can't have that. I did not realize that the way I was approaching gender was limited through the gender binary, and there was a more expansive way to view gender diversity and inclusion. As part of my research, 431 early childhood teachers responded to my survey, which asked questions about their belief, perspective, and practices related to supporting gender diversity and inclusion. Now, this is where it gets concerning. 430 ECE teachers responding to a survey. Do ECE teachers understand biology and truth? Well, let's find out. When asked structured questions about gender concepts in the questionnaire, most teachers, almost 70%, distinguished between gender and biological sex as separate concepts, whilst 31% viewed them as the same concept. Okay, that is disturbing. Almost 70% of the respondents are confused about biology and have brought into gender theory. I mean, if this reflects the ECE workforce, and if I was a parent of preschoolers, I wouldn't be leading them anywhere near one of those centres. Or, however, based on the questions being asked, maybe only the activist teachers responded. So there were 430 responses, right? I actually Googled how many ECE teachers there are in New Zealand. In the 2018 census, there were more than 30,000. So this response of 430 is very, very small and hopefully irrelevant. Continues, the majority of kayako teachers, 78%, indicated gender develops or may change across a lifespan aligned post-structuralist gender views. A smaller group, 22%, believe gender remains permanent throughout a lifespan aligned with biological gender views. So just 22% understand biological truth. The writer says, as I step back and consider the survey findings, I am heartened that the majority of ECE kayako wanted to be supportive of gender diversity and foster inclusion in their settings. I am not surprised there is a small proportion of kayako who are not there yet. I'm not surprised because of the way gender diversity is viewed in wider society and because there is a lack of support for kayako on this topic. Did you hear that? The way gender diversity is viewed in wider society. Yes, apparently you and I and midwives and pediatricians have got it all wrong. When Kayako are actively inclusive of gender diversity, there are many benefits to children's well-being and learning. We can normalise differences, support children to be open-minded and inclusive of minority genders, provide representation, and create opportunities for children to explore their ideas about gender in healthy and non-stereotypical ways. Remember, this is 2 to 4 year olds. While we don't know the exact number of young children who identify as non-binary or gender diverse due to a lack of data, we are beginning to gather better information. The Growing Up in New Zealand study recently asked 4,500 New Zealand 12-year-olds questions about their gender identities. 12-year-olds. While most children gave answers to suggest their gender aligned with their biological sex, almost 10% gave answers that their gender did not align with their biological sex. Well, yes, I've actually done a McBlog on that study and that particular question. I wouldn't be quoting that finding if you want to quote credible, objective research. But the article continues on this page. Being inclusive of gender diversity is not about introducing adult ideas into ECE. Gender inclusivity is about supporting children, preschool children, to dismantle gender stereotypes, be accepting of gender differences, and view gender beyond binary limitations. And then you'll see down the bottom there, extra resources and further reading, and they recommend none other than Inside Out. Yes, not quite finished just yet. There's this article, an article by EC Men's. It's a nationwide network supporting and celebrating gender diversity in early childhood education here in Aotearoa. Now, I think it's for men, but given that they probably can't define what a man is or a woman, I'd say that anyone can join the group. Anyway, it says, together we are helping to create the society of tomorrow, a society that is just and respectful, peaceful and caring. A big part of this is that the teachers who are with our tamariki every day should reflect the society in which they live, with caring and compassionate adults of different skin colours who speak a variety of languages and, of course, represent a variety of genders. This is especially true as our shared understanding of gender has grown to a place where we see gender as both fluid and non-binary, and as a social construct which allows individuals unprecedented opportunities to be the person they really want to be. This change in perception has been mirrored in research showing that children's understanding of gender differences can start as young as 18 months old. Toddlers are already beginning to understand and define gender before they reach the age of 2. Yes, I think they're serious. Do you still want these men near your kids? EC Men's as an organisation is at a crossroads. While the many benefits of having good male role models in the lives of young children are well established and well known, fathers matter, men matter, the complementarity of the sexes matters a lot. That's why it takes a male and a female to create a child. That's probably the only thing that they've got right in this magazine. They say the place of non-binary and gender fluid kayako teachers in our sector is less well defined. As our understanding of gender has evolved, so our kaupapa as an organisation must evolve. From advocating and supporting men in ECE to advocating for the chance for all people to be able to follow their own path and forge their own destiny. So now they have to come up with a new name because you definitely can't have men in your name, eh? I mean, what is a man? So you'll see the suggestions there include EC Equality, EC Engender, ECE Plus, ECE Spectrum, ECE Diverse, ECE Allies. That was exhausting, wasn't it? Quite an amazing magazine. Thank you to the person who sent it to me. Don't read it, I'll read it for you. ECE's preschools and kindergartens should stick to allowing children to be children and not polluting their minds with confusing and radical sexual and gender ideology. But as you can now see, the gender and sexuality ideology is starting way earlier than you possibly thought. As some people have commented, they're coming for your kids. Maybe it's time to check on your local preschool or kindy just to make sure that they aren't serving up the woke Kool-Aid and still understand biology and truth and respect your role as the parent. Your children and your grandchildren deserve that protection.